Sophia Carter had built an empire with nothing but ambition and relentless determination. As the CEO of Carter Enterprises, she made billion-dollar decisions before lunch and negotiated contracts that left seasoned executives speechless. But there was one thing she couldn't seem to master: being there for her 10-year-old son, Noah. She wasn't a bad mother. She just had too much on her plate. "Noah," she called, setting her designer bag down on the kitchen counter. "In my room," came his voice, slightly muffled. Sophia exhaled, relief washing over her. At least he was home. She glanced at the time, 6:45 p.m. The new tutor was supposed to be here at 6 sharp, yet she hadn't seen or heard anyone. Frowning, she made her way down the hallway to Noah's room and, to her surprise, found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, fully engrossed in a math game spread out in front of him. Beside him, casually leaning against the bed, was a man she had never seen before. Jake Lawson looked up as she entered, his dark blue eyes meeting hers with calm confidence. He had an easygoing demeanor, dressed in jeans and a button-up, sleeves rolled up as if he were completely at home. "Mom, this is Jake." Noah grinned. "He's awesome." Sophia blinked. "Excuse me, who?" Jake stood, offering a handshake. "Jake Lawson. I'm here for the tutoring session." Sophia didn't take his hand. "That's not possible. I hired Dr. Ellison. She was supposed to start today." Jake hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, about that. I think there was a mix-up. I got a call about tutoring at this address. I assumed it was meant for me." Sophia folded her arms, irritation creeping in. She was paying top dollar for a highly qualified, PhD-level tutor, not some random guy who showed up at her house by accident. "You assume?" she echoed. "Do you even have any credentials?" "Mom," Noah whined. "He's really good. He taught me a trick to do fractions, and I actually get it now." Sophia's gaze flickered between her son's eager face and Jake's steady expression. Something about him annoyed her. Maybe it was the way he didn't seem fazed by her scrutiny, or maybe it was the fact that Noah was already too comfortable around him. "I'll handle this," she said firmly. "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate that you took the time to come, but I need a tutor with the right qualifications." There was clearly a mistake. Jake nodded as if he expected her reaction. "Fair enough, but before I go, let me ask you something. When was the last time Noah was excited about math?" Sophia hesitated. Jake smiled slightly. "Right, you can hire someone with all the degrees in the world, but if they can't connect with him, it won't mean much." Sophia clenched her jaw. She hated admitting he had a point. Noah had struggled for years with tutors, never truly clicking with anyone. But that didn't mean she was about to take a risk on some stranger. "I'll think about it," she said curtly. Jake gave a small nod, then turned to Noah. "Hey buddy, I guess this is goodbye for now." Noah's face fell. "Wait, does that mean you're not coming back?" "We'll see," Jake said, ruffling his hair before grabbing his bag and heading toward the door. Sophia followed him. As soon as they were out of Noah's earshot, she lowered her voice. "I need to know who you are before I even consider this. How did you even end up in tutoring?" Jake exhaled. "I used to be a teacher, middle school math. I left a few years ago, started my own business, and picked up tutoring to help pay the bills." Sophia arched a brow. "What kind of business?" "Educational consulting," he answered. "Didn't exactly take off the way I hoped." Sophia studied him, trying to decide if he was being honest. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant. "I need to verify everything," she said. "If I find any reason to believe you're not who you say you are, you won't be coming back." Jake smirked. "Understood, boss." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not your boss." "Not yet," he quipped before stepping out the door. That night, Sophia sat in bed with her laptop researching Jake Lawson. He checked out. Former math teacher. No criminal record. Several testimonials from parents who swore he was the best tutor their kids had ever had. Still, it nagged at her. She didn't like surprises, especially when it came to Noah. She shut her laptop and sighed. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe, just maybe, Noah needed someone like Jake. The next morning, Noah bounced into the kitchen. "Is Jake coming back?" Sophia glanced at him, hesitating for only a moment. "He might." Noah grinned. "Yes, he said I was actually good at math. No one's ever said that before." Sophia's heart clenched. She had spent years making sure Noah had everything money could buy. Yet, somehow, this stranger had given him something she hadn't: confidence. She picked up her phone and dialed. Jake answered on the second ring. "Sophia Carter," he said, amused. "Didn't think I'd hear from you so soon." She rolled her eyes. "Don't get cocky. You start on a trial basis. 1 week. No guarantees after that." Jake chuckled. "Got it. See you at 6. As she hung up, she realized she was smiling. She quickly wiped the smile off her face. This was just about Noah, nothing else. Sophia wasn't sure why she felt so uneasy about Jake coming back. It wasn't as if she hadn't hired tutors before. This was supposed to be temporary, just a week-long trial to see if he was actually worth keeping. Yet something about him threw her off balance, and she hated that feeling. When Jake arrived for his second session, she watched him like a hawk. "All right, Noah," Jake said, settling onto the floor beside him. "We're tackling word problems today. Ever heard of the distract and trick rule?" Noah's eyes widened with interest. "No, what is it?" Jake grinned. "It's when math questions throw in a bunch of useless information just to confuse you. But here's the secret. If you learn how to ignore the distractions, the problem gets way easier." Sophia leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "And how exactly do you plan on teaching that? Jake shot her a look, half amusement, half challenge. Why don't you sit in and find out? She scoffed. I have work to do. Still, she lingered as Jake walked Noah through an example, breaking it down in a way that felt more like a game than a lesson. Within minutes, Noah was laughing, confidently answering questions without the hesitation she was so used to seeing. When the session ended, Noah practically beamed. I actually get it now? Mom, did you see? Sophia forced a nod. I saw. Jake smirked. Still skeptical? She ignored his cocky tone. We'll see if it sticks. As the days passed, Sophia begrudgingly admitted that Jake was effective. Noah went from dreading math to actively looking forward to his tutoring sessions. He even started doing problems on his own, something she had never seen before. But what unsettled her wasn't Jake's ability as a tutor. It was the way he made himself comfortable in her home, the way he'd casually tease her, the way Noah had grown so attached to him so quickly, and, worst of all, the way she found herself noticing him in ways she shouldn't. She told herself it was just annoyance, but deep down, she knew better. The night of the gala arrived before Sophia had time to dwell on it. It was one of those events she couldn't avoid, an exclusive gathering of CEOs, investors, and high-profile figures, all dressed in their finest. She wore a sleek black gown, her hair swept up in a flawless style. She was prepared for an evening of networking, small talk, and business deals. What she wasn't prepared for was running into Jake. Yet there he was, standing across the room, dressed in a tailored navy suit, looking entirely too at ease for someone who had no place being at such an event. Her eyes narrowed. What was he doing here? As if sensing her stare, Jake glanced up, and when he saw her, his lips curved into that infuriating smirk. Sophia exhaled sharply. Just ignore him. She turned away, focusing on a conversation with an investor, but moments later, she felt a presence beside her. Didn't expect to see you here, CEO Carter, Jake said smoothly. She turned to him, keeping her expression cool. I could say the same for you. He chuckled. I have connections. Surprised? Annoyed, she muttered. His grin widened. And yet, here we are. Before she could fire back, a man approached, one of her longtime business associates, Daniel Mercer. Sophia, Daniel greeted warmly, then glanced at Jake. I see you've met Mr. Lawson. Sophia stiffened. Wait, you know him? Jake raised a brow. Didn't do your research thoroughly enough, did you? Daniel chuckled. Jake's done some consulting for my company. Sharp guy. Sophia stared at Jake, stunned. He had never mentioned this. Jake leaned in slightly. You look like you've seen a ghost, Carter. She snapped out of it. I just didn't expect my son's tutor to be mingling with my business contacts. Jake shrugged. Multitasking. You should try it sometime. She clenched her jaw, resisting the urge to smack the smug look off his face. Daniel, oblivious to the tension, chuckled. You two seem well acquainted. Sophia forced a polite smile. Something like that. Jake's smirk deepened, as if enjoying her discomfort. Don't worry, Sophia, he said, voice laced with amusement. I won't tell anyone that you secretly enjoy having me around. She narrowed her eyes. Careful, Lawson. You're still on a trial basis. Jake winked. And yet, I'm still here. Sophia inhaled sharply. She had no idea what annoyed her more, the fact that he was at this event at all, or the fact that, deep down, she was starting to wonder if she actually wanted him to leave. Sophia left the gala that night with a million questions running through her mind, most of them about Jake Lawson. She had hired him as a temporary tutor for Noah, a man she initially dismissed as unqualified. Yet, here he was, mingling with her business contacts, earning respect in circles she hadn't imagined he was part of. That alone should have been enough to put her on edge. But what really unsettled her? The way she couldn't stop thinking about him. The next morning, Sophia was sitting in her home office, reviewing reports, when Noah burst in, grinning. Mom, is Jake coming today? She glanced up from her screen. Yes, in an hour. What? Noah fidgeted with excitement. I want to show him the book we picked at the store. He said history is cool, but I didn't believe him at first. But now maybe he's right. Sophia arched a brow. You're actually excited about history? Noah grinned. Yeah, Jake tells it like a story, not just facts. It's like an adventure. She smothered a smile. It was remarkable. Jake had managed to do in a few days what years of tutors couldn't. Still, it didn't mean she had to trust him completely. When Jake arrived, he was back to his usual relaxed self, strolling into her home like he belonged there. Morning, boss, he teased as he walked past her, heading straight to Noah. Sophia rolled her eyes, but followed, determined to observe him more closely today. As the session went on, she noticed something she hadn't before. The way Jake subtly encouraged Noah, the patience in his voice, the genuine excitement when Noah got something right. He wasn't just good at teaching. He cared, and that was dangerous, because people who cared always left in the end. That evening, unable to shake her curiosity, Sophia did what she did best, research. She typed Jake Lawson, former teacher, into her laptop and pressed enter. What she found made her breath hitch. There it was, his past laid out in news articles. Jake had once been a respected history teacher, even winning awards for his engaging teaching methods. But 5 years ago, he had abruptly left teaching after a scandal. A scandal that, from what Sophia could gather, wasn't even his fault. A student had accused him of unfair treatment after receiving a failing grade. The accusation spiraled spiraled into a full-blown controversy when the students' wealthy parents pushed for action. Even though the investigation found no wrongdoing, the damage was done. The school district didn't renew his contract. His career was over. Sophia leaned back in her chair, stunned. Jake had lost everything over a lie, and yet he still smiled so easily, still carried himself like a man with no burdens. She closed her laptop, exhaling slowly. This changed everything. The storm rolled in faster than expected, dark clouds swallowing the evening sky as heavy raindrops pounded against the windows of Sophia's house. Wind howled through the streets, rattling trees and sending fallen leaves swirling across the pavement. Lightning flashed, followed by a deep rumble of thunder that shook the walls. Sophia sighed, rubbing her temples as she peered out the window. "Well, this is just perfect," she muttered. Noah, on the other hand, was thrilled. "Whoa, that lightning was so cool," he said, pressing his face against the glass. "Can Jake stay the night? It's not safe to drive, right?" Jake Lawson chuckled from the doorway, hands casually tucked into his pockets. "Looks like I don't have much of a choice, kiddo." Sophia shot him a look but couldn't deny the truth. The roads were already starting to flood, and the power flickered briefly, signaling just how bad the storm might get. Noah grinned. "Yes, it's like a sleepover." Jake smirked. "Except I didn't bring pajamas." Sophia exhaled sharply. "You can borrow something of Noah's," she said. "I'm sure there's something oversized enough that'll fit." "I appreciate the hospitality," Jake teased. "Don't get used to it," she snapped, but there was no bite in her words. As the night deepened and the storm raged on, Sophia did her best to ignore the fact that Jake was still there, a presence too large to ignore in her home. Hours later, with Noah finally asleep, Sophia sat alone in the dimly lit living room, a cup of tea in her hands. The fire crackled in the fireplace, offering warmth and a steady glow against the storm outside. Jake walked in, his hair still damp from washing his face. "You're still up?" She nodded. "Couldn't sleep. Storm's too loud." Jake took a seat across from her, stretching his long legs out. "Same." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt oddly natural. Finally, Jake sighed. "So, you looked me up." Sophia stiffened. "You knew?" "I could tell," he said, giving her a half smile. "Your attitude toward me changed this morning. You were looking at me like you were trying to solve a puzzle." Sophia hesitated before setting her cup down. "I know what happened to you." Jake's jaw tightened, and Sophia took a slow breath. "And I know it wasn't your fault." For the first time, she saw something flicker across his face, relief mixed with something else. "Most people don't bother digging that far," he admitted. Sophia studied him carefully. "Tell me the truth. What really happened?" Jake exhaled and leaned back against the couch, staring into the fire. "I was a teacher for almost 10 years. I loved it. But one day, I had a student, Nathan Carter. He was smart but lazy, entitled. His family had money, and he thought he could cruise through life without putting in the work." Sophia listened intently, her fingers tightening around her cup. "He failed my class, not because I wanted him to, but because he didn't do the work," Jake continued. His father was furious. Instead of accepting that his son had been irresponsible, he found another way to fix things. A lie. He paid another student to say I acted inappropriately toward her. Sophia's stomach twisted. "That's disgusting." Jake nodded, his expression dark. "It was a complete fabrication, but in cases like that, the truth doesn't always matter. People love a scandal. My reputation was ruined overnight. Even when the girl later admitted it was all a lie, the damage was already done. I lost my job, my credibility. I had to start over." Sophia sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words settling over her. She had assumed there was more to his past, but she hadn't expected something so unjust. "That's why you became a tutor?" she finally asked. Jake shrugged. "It was the only way I could still teach. I love working with kids, but schools wouldn't touch me. This was the best alternative." Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm sorry." Jake's gaze flickered to hers. "For what?" "For assuming the worst," she admitted. "For not giving you the benefit of the doubt." A slow, wry smile touched his lips. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." Silence settled again, but this time it felt heavier, weighted by an understanding neither of them expected to have. As the fire crackled, Sophia shifted slightly, acutely aware of how close Jake was. The warmth of the room made the space between them feel smaller, more intimate. She wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly, they weren't just two people talking. There was something else, an unspoken pull. Jake's gaze lingered on hers, his blue eyes unreadable. "You know, Sophia," he murmured, "you're not as tough as you pretend to be." Her breath caught. "And you're not as carefree as you pretend to be." A slow, knowing smile curved his lips. "Touché." The air thickened between them, something unspoken humming in the silence. Jake reached out, his fingers brushing against hers, light as a whisper. A test. Sophia's pulse quickened. She knew she should pull away. She knew this was dangerous, but she didn't move. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, understood, wanted. Jake leaned in, just slightly, close enough that she could feel his breath, close enough that Sophia stood abruptly, breaking the spell. This can't happen," she said, her voice tight. Jake exhaled slowly, leaning back. "Yeah," he said, but his tone was laced with something unreadable. "I get it." Sophia turned away, but her heart was pounding pounding in her chest, because the truth was, she didn't trust herself to say no again, and that terrified her. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind crisp, fresh air and clear skies. Jake was already up, making breakfast in the kitchen when Sophia walked in. He looked up, offering her an easy smile. "Morning," he said casually, as if nothing had happened the night before. Sophia hesitated before nodding. "Morning." Noah ran into the room, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Did Jake stay over?" Jake ruffled his hair. "Yeah, buddy. The storm was too bad to leave." Noah grinned. "Awesome. Does that mean you'll make pancakes?" Jake laughed. "I think that can be arranged." As Sophia watched them, something inside her twisted. She had fought so hard to keep her life controlled, to keep people at arm's length. But last night, for the first time in years, she had let someone in, and she wasn't sure if she could ignore that anymore. Sophia barely had time to breathe. The walls of her office felt like they were closing in as the latest reports from her executive team painted a grim picture. One of her company's biggest deals was on the verge of collapse, and if she didn't act fast, years of work could crumble overnight. Investors were already getting nervous, and competitors were circling like vultures. She knew what had to be done. Late nights, strategy meetings, full focus. But as Sophia immersed herself in damage control, something else began to slip. Her time with Noah. At first, it was little things. She missed dinner once. Then again. Soon, her son stopped waiting up for her. The playful morning conversations turned into hurried goodbyes as she rushed out the door. Noah stopped complaining about it, and that was the worst part. He was getting used to it. The only constant in his life now, Jake. Noah had started spending more and more time with Jake, especially after school. Whenever Sophia made it home in time to see them, she found them laughing together, engaged in deep discussions, or working through a history lesson in a way that actually seemed fun. It was something she never saw Noah do with any of his previous tutors. One night, long past Noah's bedtime, Sophia found herself standing outside her son's room, listening to the soft murmur of Jake's voice. And that's how they cracked the code. It took patience, logic, and a little bit of luck. And they won. Noah asked, his voice full of excitement. They won because they didn't give up. Silence followed. And then Noah whispered, "I wish you were my dad." Sophia felt something in her chest tighten painfully. "Hey, buddy, I think your mom's doing her best," Jake said softly. "She works hard for you." "I know," Noah admitted, "but I never see her anymore." Sophia stepped back before she could hear more. The next morning, as she got ready for work, Sophia made up her mind. She needed to set boundaries. Jake was getting too close, not just to Noah, but to her too. And she couldn't afford distractions right now. When Jake arrived later that day, she called him aside before he could head to Noah's room. "Jake, I appreciate everything you've done for Noah, but I think we need to set some limits." Jake frowned. "Limits?" Sophia crossed her arms, feigning confidence. "I don't want Noah to rely on you too much. You're his tutor, not his father." Jake's expression hardened slightly, but he nodded. "Of course, I get it." "Good," she said, ignoring the sinking feeling in her gut. But for the rest of the day, she couldn't shake the image of Noah looking up at Jake like he was his hero. The following week, things at the company went from bad to worse. The board was threatening to pull out of the deal, and her team was demanding constant decisions. Sophia spent nearly all her waking hours at the office. She barely had time to eat, let alone check in on Noah. It wasn't until her assistant reminded her about parent-teacher conferences that she even remembered she had promised Noah she'd be there. She checked the time, 7:45 p.m. If she left now, she could just make it. But then her phone buzzed, a call from her CFO. "Sophia, we have a problem. You need to get on this call now." She looked at the time again, then at the picture of Noah on her desk, then back at the phone. Noah would have to understand. Sophia walked into the house just before midnight, exhausted but victorious. They had saved the deal. She expected Noah to be asleep. Instead, she found him sitting in the living room, his arms crossed, eyes red. "You didn't come," he said, his voice trembling. Sophia sighed, rubbing her temples. "Noah, I'm sorry. Work. You always say that," he snapped. Her head shot up at the tone. Noah never yelled at her. "You missed my conference. You missed movie night. You miss everything." His small hands balled into fists. "But you know who did show up?" "Jake." Sophia's heart sank. "Noah, I hate this." Noah shouted. "I hate your job. I hate how you never have time for me." Tears welled up in his eyes. "I wish Dad was still here." Sophia felt like he had slapped her. Noah ran to his room and slammed the door. And just like that, Sophia realized she had pushed away the one person who had been holding things together. Jake. The next day, Sophia hesitated before knocking on Jake's door. When he opened it, his expression was unreadable. "Sophia, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, feeling awkward, "for being there for Noah." Jake exhaled and leaned against the doorframe. He needed someone. Sophia swallowed hard. "I should have been that someone." Jake nodded but didn't say anything. Sophia hesitated, then asked, "Why did you go last night?" "You didn't have to." Jake gave her a small smile. "Because Noah asked me to, and I made a promise to him." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. She had broken so many promises to Noah, but Jake had kept every single one. "Jake, he held up a hand. "Sophia, I get it. You have a lot on your plate. You're protecting yourself. But if you're so busy building your world, don't forget to make space for the people in it." His words hit harder than she expected. For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt something shift inside her. Maybe she had been wrong about everything. Maybe it wasn't Jake she was trying to push away. Maybe it was herself. Sophia sat in her office, staring at the blinking notification on her phone. Noah's school talent show, 7 p.m. She had set the reminder weeks ago, back when she was sure she'd be able to make it. But that was before her company's latest crisis had thrown everything into chaos. Tonight, she had a critical dinner with one of their biggest clients, the kind of meeting that could make or break the future of her business. Missing it wasn't an option. She exhaled and picked up her phone, dialing home. Noah answered almost immediately, his excitement bubbling through the receiver. "Mom, are you on your way?" Sophia winced. "Sweetheart, His voice faltered. "You're not coming, are you?" Her chest tightened. "I really wanted to. But this client dinner it's always work." The disappointment in his voice was like a knife. "Noah, I promise I'll make it up to you. Maybe we can do something fun this weekend." Noah was silent for a long moment before he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's fine." Then he hung up. Sophia sat there, gripping the phone, feeling like she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. By the time Noah arrived at school that evening, his excitement had dimmed. He tried to keep his chin up, to pretend it didn't matter, but deep down, it did. He had seen other kids talk about their parents coming, moms and dads showing up, cheering them on, recording their performances, but not his. Noah shuffled into the backstage area, clutching his script. His heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to perform anymore. Then a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Hey buddy, heard you might need a cheerleader tonight." Noah spun around, eyes widening. "Jake." Jake grinned. "Think I'd miss your big moment." For the first time that day, Noah smiled. As he stepped onto the stage later that night, he searched the audience. And there, in the middle of the crowd, was Jake, clapping, smiling, giving him a thumbs up. Noah straightened his back and delivered his lines with confidence. And in that moment, he forgot all about the empty seat where his mother was supposed to be. Sophia arrived home late that night, exhausted but relieved. The dinner had been a success. The client had signed the contract, ensuring stability for her company. But as she set down her bag, she noticed how quiet the house was. Then she saw Noah's talent show program lying on the counter. Her stomach twisted. Just then, Noah walked into the room, wearing his pajamas, his expression unreadable. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "How was the show?" Noah shrugged. "It was great." Jake came. Sophia's chest tightened. "Oh, he sat in the front row," Noah continued. "Said he wouldn't miss it." Sophia forced a smile. "I'm glad he was there for you." Noah gave her a long, searching look. "I wish it had been you." The words stung. Before she could say anything, he turned and walked back to his room. Sophia stood there, guilt pressing down on her like a weight. And just as she was about to follow him, she saw another note on the counter. "Jake took Noah to the show. Hope that's okay. Mrs. Evans, neighbor." Sophia's jaw clenched. Jake. The next morning, Sophia stormed into the cafe where she knew Jake liked to grab his coffee. She spotted him by the window, casually sipping his drink, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. "Jake." He looked up, surprised. "Sophia?" She slammed her hands on the table. "You went behind my back." Jake blinked. "Excuse me. You took Noah to his event, without even telling me." Jake sighed, setting his cup down. "Sophia, Noah asked me to go. He needed someone." "I am his someone," she snapped. Jake's jaw tightened. "Then why weren't you there?" Sophia's breath caught. "That's not the point. The point is, you had no right to step in like that. You're his tutor, Jake, not his father." Something flickered in Jake's eyes, something she couldn't quite place. Hurt, frustration, maybe even regret. "I wasn't trying to take your place," he said, his voice calmer now. "I was just trying to be there for a kid who felt alone." Sophia folded her arms, refusing to let herself feel guilty. "Well, I don't need your help." Jake studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You know what, Sophia? I think you're right." Then he stood up, grabbed his coffee, and walked away. And for the first time since meeting him, Sophia had the sinking feeling she had just lost something important. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. Had she overreacted? Had she pushed Jake away for no reason? A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Noah peeked inside. "Mom." She sat up. "Hey, sweetheart. Can't sleep?" Noah hesitated before walking in and sitting on the edge of her bed. "Is Jake mad at us?" Sophia exhaled. "I don't know." Noah looked down. "I like him. I know." He fiddled with the edge of the blanket. "I know you're busy, and I know you have to work, but sometimes it feels like you don't want to be around me." Sophia's throat tightened. "That's not true. I love you more than anything." "Then why do you keep missing stuff?" Tears burned behind her eyes. She had no answer for him. Noah sighed and stood up. "I just wish things were different." Then he left, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts. Sophia stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. Somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that being a good mother meant providing everything Noah needed. But what if what he needed was just her? And what if, in her fear of letting people in, she had pushed away the one person who had made both of them happier? Jake. She had accused him of overstepping. But the truth was, he had stepped up when she hadn't. And now he was gone. For the first time in a long time, Sophia didn't know how to fix something. And the worst part? She wasn't sure if she could. The absence of Jake was like a quiet storm that had settled over their home. Noah wasn't the same. At first, Sophia thought he was just upset about the talent show. But as the days days passed, it became painfully clear her son wasn't just disappointed. He was hurt. Dinner time became eerily quiet. Where Noah used to talk endlessly about his day, he now gave one-word answers. His once bright, excited energy had dulled, and it was like she was watching him slowly fade. One evening, as she placed a plate of spaghetti in front of him, she forced a smile. "How was school today?" Noah poked at his food. "Fine. Did anything fun happen?" He shrugged. "Not really." A lump formed in her throat. "Do you want to go to the park this weekend? Maybe grab some ice cream." Noah finally looked up, and for the first time in days, she saw emotion in his eyes. But it wasn't excitement. It was disappointment. "You're just trying to make up for Jake being gone," he said flatly. Sophia's stomach twisted. "That's not true, Noah. I just want to spend time with you." He let out a small, bitter laugh. "Now you do?" The words hit her harder than she expected. Before she could say anything else, Noah pushed his chair back and walked to his room, leaving his barely touched dinner behind. Sophia sat there, staring at the empty seat across from her, her heart sinking. At work, things weren't any better. The deal she had secured at the dinner, the one she had sacrificed Noah's talent show for, was now falling apart. The client was hesitating, questioning if her company was stable enough to handle such a major contract. Investors were getting nervous. Employees were stressed. Sophia spent hours in her office, poring over numbers, emails, anything to stop the slow collapse of everything she had built. But for the first time, she wondered, was it even worth it? She had spent years convincing herself that success would make everything better, that being the best CEO, running the biggest company, and securing the most lucrative deals would be enough. But as she sat in her corner office, surrounded by accolades and achievements, she had never felt more alone. And worse, she wasn't even sure she cared about winning anymore. It was a Friday evening when it all came crashing down. Sophia had stayed late at work, hoping to salvage what she could of the business deal. By the time she got home, it was almost 9 p.m. She expected Noah to be asleep. Instead, she found him sitting on the couch, his backpack beside him. Her heart dropped. "Noah, what are you doing up?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer and noticed something that made her stomach twist. He was wearing his sneakers, and his backpack wasn't just beside him. It was packed. Her breath caught. "Are you going somewhere?" Noah finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "I called Dad." Sophia froze. Her ex-husband, Noah's father, the man who had walked away from them years ago. "He said I could stay with him for the weekend." Noah continued, his voice quiet but firm. "He's on his way." Sophia's hands clenched into fists. "Noah, you can't just." "Why not?" he snapped, standing up. "You're never home. You don't have time for me." "And Jake." He stopped himself, his face crumbling. "Jake was the only one who made me feel like I mattered, and you made him leave." Sophia felt her breath hitch. "Noah, that's not. Just forget it," he muttered. "Dad will be here soon." Sophia's mind raced. She couldn't let this happen. But before she could say another word, the doorbell rang. And just like that, her son walked past her, out the door, and into the arms of the man who had abandoned them years ago. And she was left standing there, realizing she had never felt more like a failure. The house was too quiet without Noah. Sophia spent the entire weekend walking through the empty rooms, replaying every mistake she had made in her head. She had pushed Jake away. She had let Noah feel unwanted. And now, she was losing them both. By Sunday evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her keys and drove. Not to her office, not to a business meeting. She drove straight to Jake's apartment. And when she knocked on his door, she had no idea if he would even answer. But he did. And the moment their eyes met, Sophia felt something inside her crack. Because for the first time, she saw it. The hurt, the disappointment, the same pain she had seen in Noah's eyes. Jake crossed his arms. Sophia, her throat tightened. "Can we talk?" Jake hesitated before stepping aside. She walked inside, heart pounding. The apartment was simple, nothing fancy, nothing like her world of luxury and business meetings. And yet, it felt more like a home than her mansion ever had. She turned to face him. "I messed up." Jake arched a brow. "Yeah, you did." Sophia let out a small, humorless laugh. No hesitation, he leaned against the counter. "You want me to lie?" She exhaled. "No." A beat of silence passed between them. Then she swallowed hard. Noah left. Jake's posture stiffened. "What?" "He's with his father. He thinks I don't care about him." And maybe, her voice wavered, maybe he's right. Jake's expression softened, but he didn't speak. Sophia let out a shaky breath. "I've spent so much time trying to be the best at everything. But the one thing I was supposed to get right, being his mom, I've completely failed." Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You haven't failed, Sophia. You just lost your way." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "And how do I fix it?" Jake held her gaze. "You already know the answer." Sophia inhaled sharply. Because she did. She had to fight for her son. And maybe, just maybe, she had to fight for something else too. Someone else. Her heart pounded as she took a small step forward. "Jake, His phone buzzed. Jake glanced at it, then frowned. "It's Noah." Sophia's breath caught. "What? Why is he calling you?" Jake didn't answer. He just picked up the phone. And the second he did, his entire expression changed. Something was wrong. And Sophia knew this wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning. Jake's face went pale as he listened to Noah's voice on the phone. Sophia's chest tightened. "What is it? What's wrong?" Jake held up a hand, his focus on the call. "Noah, slow down, buddy. What happened?" Sophia strained to hear, but could only catch snippets. "Don't want to be here anymore. Wish you and Mom mom actually cared. Dad doesn't even listen to me. A lump formed in Sophia's throat. Jake's face hardened. Where are you? Sophia could barely breathe as the conversation continued. Jake's expression shifted from concern to urgency, and then he exhaled sharply. Okay, stay put. I'm coming. He hung up and looked straight at Sophia. Noah's at a diner a few blocks from his dad's place. He ran off. Sophia's heart stopped. He what? He got into a fight with his dad, Jake said, already grabbing his keys. Didn't feel like he belonged there. So he left. Sophia was already moving toward the door. We need to go now. The drive to the diner felt endless. Sophia's hands were gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Her son, her baby, was out there, feeling lost, feeling abandoned. And it was her fault. Jake sat beside her, unusually quiet. When she stole a glance at him, his jaw was tight, his eyes dark with emotion. When they pulled up to the small, dimly lit diner, Sophia barely put the car in park before rushing inside. And there, sitting in a booth with his head down, was Noah. Sophia's heart nearly broke at the sight of him. Noah, she breathed, rushing over. Noah looked up, and his lip trembled when he saw her. But instead of running into her arms, he hesitated. Jake stepped forward. Hey kid, you okay? Noah's shoulders slumped. I didn't want to be there anymore. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat and slowly sat across from him. Baby, why didn't you call me? He shrugged. You were busy. You're always busy. Guilt slammed into her like a truck. Noah sighed. I thought maybe dad would be different, but he barely talks to me. He just puts on the TV and does his own thing. He doesn't care about what I like, what I do. His voice cracked. Neither of you do. Sophia's eyes burned. Noah, that's not true. Jake placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. Hey, I care. Your mom cares. I know she hasn't always shown it the right way, but trust me, she loves you more than anything. Sophia nodded, her throat tight. I do, Noah, and I know I've messed up, but I want to fix it. I want to be better. Noah looked between them, uncertainty in his eyes. Then, finally, he let out a shaky breath. I just want things to be like before. Sophia reached for his hands. We'll make it better, sweetheart. I promise. Noah hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, Sophia felt like she could breathe again. Later that night, back at home, Noah had fallen asleep in his room, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. Sophia and Jake sat on the couch in silence. It was the first time in a long time that the house didn't feel so empty. Sophia took a deep breath. I don't know how to thank you. Jake let out a soft chuckle. It's Noah. You don't have to thank me for caring about him. She turned to him. It's more than that, Jake. You've been there when I wasn't. You've been, she swallowed. You've been what I should have been. Jake's expression softened. You're not a bad mom, Sophia. You're just scared. Her eyes widened slightly. Scared? Yeah, he said, leaning back. Scared to let people in. Scared to lose control. Sophia tensed, because he was right. She had spent so much of her life proving she didn't need anyone, that she could handle everything on her own. But Jake made her want to believe in something else. Something real. Something terrifying. She looked at him, ready to say something. Anything, when he sighed. I should tell you something, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Sophia frowned. What? Jake exhaled. I got a job offer. Her stomach twisted. A job? He nodded. A school in Chicago. They need a curriculum developer. It's a good opportunity. Sophia's breath caught. He was leaving? Jake studied her. I haven't decided yet, but I need to start thinking about my future. Something inside Sophia cracked. If Jake left, if he walked away for good, would she lose her chance to make things right? Would she lose him? Sophia had never been afraid of anything in business. She could walk into any boardroom, face the toughest negotiations, and never break a sweat. But this was different. This was real. This was her heart on the line, and she didn't know if she was strong enough to risk it. Jake watched her carefully. You okay? She forced a smile. Of course. It's a great opportunity. His brows furrowed, like he was waiting for her to say more. But she didn't, because she didn't know how. Jake sighed. I should go. Sophia's heart clenched. He stood up, stretching slightly. Thanks for letting me stay until Noah was settled. She nodded, standing as well. Of course. They walked to the door, the silence stretching between them. Jake reached for the handle but paused, glancing back at her. His eyes searched hers. You know, sometimes you just have to take a chance. Sophia's breath hitched. On what? Jake's lips curled slightly, but it was sad. On the people who matter. And then he was gone. Sophia stood there, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. She had spent years thinking love was a weakness, that needing someone was a flaw. But maybe she had been wrong. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to lose the one person who had made her see that. Sophia sat in her office, staring at the city skyline, but her mind was somewhere else. Jake was leaving. She had spent so long convincing herself that love was a distraction, that opening up to someone would only end in disappointment. But now, faced with the possibility of losing Jake forever, she realized something painful. She had been wrong. She had been so wrong. Noah had already lost one father who barely cared. Could she really stand by and let him lose another man who actually did? Could she really let herself lose someone who had come to mean so much? No, she wouldn't. For the first time in her life, she was going to stop running. She grabbed her phone and dialed her assistant. Clear my schedule for the day. Everything. No exceptions. But, Miss Carter, you have. I don't care. She cut in. Cancel it. She ended the call before she could change her mind, grabbed her keys, and bolted for the door. She had a man to find. Jake's flight was scheduled for that evening. That didn't leave her much time. time. She drove faster than she probably should have, weaving through traffic, her heart pounding. When she pulled up in front of Jake's apartment, she barely put the car in park before jumping out. Her stomach twisted as she saw him loading a suitcase into the trunk of his car. It was real. He was really leaving. Jake, he froze. Slowly, he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Sophia, she was breathless, but not from running, from fear, from the realization that if she messed this up, she might never get another chance. Jake crossed his arms. What are you doing here? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I needed to see you. His brow furrowed. Sophia, I told you. I know, she cut in. I know I pushed you away. I know I made you feel like you weren't important. And I know you probably don't believe me when I say this. But I was scared. Jake's jaw tightened. Sophia took a step closer. I've spent my whole life thinking that love was a liability, that needing someone made you weak. But you made me realize how wrong I was. Jake stayed silent. Sophia's chest tightened. You were right, Jake. About everything. I do push people away. I am scared to let anyone in. But losing you, her voice cracked. Losing you made me realize that I don't want to be that person anymore. Jake exhaled slowly. Sophia, she shook her head. Please, just don't go. Jake rubbed a hand over his face, looking torn. Sophia, he said after a long pause. Do you even hear yourself? Her stomach dropped. What? He sighed. You're saying all the right things, and I want to believe you. God, do I want to believe you? He ran a hand through his hair. But you have to understand where I'm coming from. I've been here before. I've trusted people who made me feel like I mattered, only to have them shut me out the moment things got hard. Sophia's throat tightened. Jake looked her dead in the eyes. How do I know you won't do it again? The question hit her like a punch to the gut, because she didn't have a perfect answer. She couldn't promise she'd never struggle, never push back when things got overwhelming. But she could promise one thing. You're right, she admitted. I am a work in progress, and I won't stand here and tell you I'm magically fixed overnight. She took a shaky breath. But I will tell you this. I don't want to live another day pretending I don't need you. Jake's expression softened, but the hesitation was still there. She stepped even closer. I choose you, Jake. I choose to fight for this. For us. A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Jake let out a slow exhale. Sophia, she held her breath. Then he shook his head with a small, tired chuckle. You really don't make anything easy, do you? A flicker of hope sparked in her chest. Does that mean? He studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. I don't know how to walk away from you either. Relief crashed over her like a tidal wave. But before she could say anything else, Jake smirked slightly. I do have one condition, though. She frowned. What? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have to actually let me in this time. Her breath caught. And then, for the first time in forever, she let down the last of her walls and let him in. The drive back was quiet but comforting. For once, Sophia wasn't filled with doubt. She was filled with certainty. When they pulled up to her house, Noah was waiting by the window. The moment he saw Jake step out of the car, his face lit up. Jake! Jake barely had time to react before Noah barreled into him, hugging him tightly. You're back. Noah's voice was muffled against his chest. Jake chuckled, ruffling his hair. Yeah, buddy, I'm back. Sophia watched the scene unfold, warmth spreading in her chest. This was right. This was home. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid anymore. A different kind of future. Later that evening, Sophia found herself sitting on the back patio, staring at the stars. Jake stepped out, 2 cups of tea in hand. Figured you could use one. She smiled as she took it. Thanks. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jake spoke. So what happens now? Sophia took a deep breath. Now, we figure it out. Together. He glanced at her. Together, huh? She smirked. You did ask me to let you in. He chuckled. I did, didn't I? Silence stretched again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was filled with possibility. Jake took a sip of his tea. I turned down the Chicago job. Sophia's heart skipped. You did? He nodded. Had a better offer here. She frowned. Where? He grinned. Noah's school. They want me as their new curriculum director. Something in her chest bloomed. You're staying? He held her gaze. I'm staying. And for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt like she finally got something right. Sophia woke up to the sound of laughter. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard it again. Noah's bright, uninhibited giggle, followed by Jake's deep, amused chuckle. She sat up, blinking away sleep. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, casting a golden glow over the room. It had been a long time since her house had felt alive like this. Since she had felt alive like this. She slipped out of bed and padded barefoot down the hallway, following the sounds of happiness. The sight that greeted her in the kitchen made her heart flip. Noah was sitting on the counter, legs swinging, covered in flour. Jake stood beside him, holding a bowl of pancake batter, looking equally messy. Okay, Chef Noah, Jake said, his tone serious. What's next? Noah tapped his chin, pretending to think. I say extra chocolate chips. Jake grinned. A solid choice. Sophia leaned against the doorway, watching them. This was what she had almost lost, and she would never take it for granted again. Morning, she finally said, stepping forward. Noah turned with a huge grin. Mom, Jake's teaching me how to make the best pancakes. She arched a brow. I see that. She smirked at Jake. Do all your tutoring sessions involve this much flour? Jake shrugged, completely unfazed. Only the fun ones. Sophia laughed, feeling something inside her settle. This felt right, but she knew words weren't enough. She had had promised Jake she would prove she was ready for this, to let him in, to make him a part of their lives. And today, she was going to do just that. After breakfast, which was slightly burnt but made with love, Sophia surprised Jake by pulling him aside. "I have something for you." Jake raised a brow. "Oh." She handed him a neatly folded piece of paper. Curious, he unfolded it and started reading. His eyes widened. "Sophia, what is this?" She took a deep breath. "A formal recommendation letter to the school board." Jake stared at her. You're helping me get the director job?" She nodded. "I know you turned down Chicago for us, but I also know how much teaching means to you. This job, it's yours, Jake. You deserve it." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he exhaled, shaking his head with a small smile. "You really are all in, huh?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Yeah, I am." Jake didn't say anything. He just pulled her into a deep, lingering kiss. Noah, of course, chose that exact moment to walk in. Ew, gross. Jake and Sophia broke apart, laughing. Noah made a face but grinned. "So, does this mean Jake is officially part of our family now?" Sophia looked at Jake, her heart swelling. Jake reached out, ruffling Noah's hair. "What do you think, buddy?" Noah beamed. "I think you're stuck with us." Jake chuckled. "Yeah, I think so too." A few months later, life looked completely different. Sophia wasn't just a CEO anymore. She was a mother who showed up to every one of Noah's events. She was a woman who no longer let fear dictate her choices. And she was in love. Jake got the job at Noah's school, and he thrived there. Noah adored having him around, and Sophia loved watching them grow even closer. One evening, they sat together in the backyard, just the three of them. No fancy gala, no high-pressure meetings, just them. Noah, half asleep, rested his head on Jake's shoulder. Sophia smiled. "You're good for him, you know." Jake squeezed her hand. "He's good for me, too." She looked at them, the two most important people in her life, and she knew, without a doubt, that she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not success, not power, but home. And this time, she wasn't letting go.